latest, Iran's atomic agency has reacted to the US strikes on nuclear facilities, saying that it will carry on with its nuclear activities despite the attacks on key facilities. In a statement published by the state media, the agency said that the development of the nuclear industry will not be stopped despite the evil plot of its enemies. This is the latest we're getting. Susan, what's your take on this latest development?
Yeah, we really have to, like I said, really gauge on the capacity that Iran has to retaliate. And that statement, I can't stress enough of the fact that they said that any American is a target now. This makes, well, any American anywhere in the world now a target. It's not just those troops. And it appears that they're making those assessments right now on what to do next. All Americans in the region now a target. Kash Patel, the director of FBI, believes that there are sleeper cells here in the United States. They're looking for those. They're worried that whether Iran or through one of its proxies can cause some kind of harm on American soil. That would be absolutely catastrophic.
All right, Susan, we know the American president has said that now is the time for peace. Now, what is that peace even going to look like? Because it's definitely not going to be the same definition of peace for Israel and the United States and Iran. So which rhetoric is going to gain the upper hand going forward, according to you, based on the trajectory that we're on currently?
Yeah, that's a very valid question. What does peace mean right now? And what an elusive word peace is now compared to what it was even a few hours ago when the United States carried out these strikes. What kind of peace is the United States looking for at this point? What kind of peace would Iran accept? And what about Israel? It doesn't appear that Israel is done with its attacks against Iran. The nuclear facilities were one thing, but Benjamin Netanyahu has made very clear that he thinks that Iran's ballistic missile capability is also a huge threat to Israel's security. And they said that they're going to be going after those missile capabilities until they're completely finished and done with. The issue of missile capability is a tricky point because that was one of the things that the United States, even during its 2015 nuclear deal, wanted to get Iran on board to kind of limit Iran's missile capabilities. Iran never came on board for that. It said that's our national security. So they sort of signed that watered-down nuclear deal in 2015. And ever since then, one of the main criticisms of that deal that the United States came out of and Iran ended up violating was that even though if they contain their nuclear capabilities, it will be enough to ultimately assist its missile capabilities and attack regional allies and possibly Israel as well. So again, if you're talking about peace, is there going to be negotiations now that it appears that Fordo, Natanz, Isfahan, and Iran's nuclear capabilities are obliterated? Is Iran supposed to come to the negotiating table and talk about its missile capabilities? That's very hard to imagine that would happen. What country would even do that to put its defense capabilities on the negotiating table? So, yeah, it's a very valid question that you asked. What does peace even look like at this point?
Right, and having said that, President Donald Trump has also warned Iran to not respond after the US strikes, saying that any retaliation will be met with far greater force. Now, we know that Iran is definitely not willing to back down, especially after what has just happened. And it is already, because it is already anticipated, we're sure that there would be retaliatory attacks or at least situations that would already pan out. Now, how do you think that Iran is realistically going to respond to these threats and also the very tangible strikes that have just taken place?
Yeah, so when he made those comments, we play him back. After that, he sort of said a few other things that the United States could target, and it was, again, about Iran's missile capabilities, so ballistic missile capabilities. So whether or not he's thinking of helping Israel go after those as well, that's a threat, which is a legitimate threat. The United States could do that, but again, that was just, again, we're going into circles saying that then the United States would be bogged down in this war again, and that's not what the plan, at least initially, was. It was to get rid of Iran's nuclear capabilities. How Iran can retaliate, the Strait of Hormuz is in its hands. It can start blowing up American ships there. It could even put mines without even putting its boots on the ground there, and the mines could start exploding. It could just close the Strait of Hormuz, which would be absolutely disastrous, not only for the United States, but the international community. And that way it might be able to get other countries to mediate and maybe, talk to the United States in some way, because the Strait of Hormuz is so important for the U.S. and also European countries as well. But then it could also maybe have capabilities that it hasn't shown yet, and it could inflict damage. I mean, 40,000 troops in the region is not just like 10,000 or something small. These are troops all over the region that Iran has, to a certain extent, access to if it wants to attack. And then, of course, it could really heavily go after Israel, which we have seen that, for the most part, it has been able to get its missiles all the way to Israel, and it has a significant number of missiles to get to Israel as well.
Right, Susan, and the U.S. President has said that the U.S. has erased the threat to Israel and not this threat to the United States. Now, that is not going to sit well with a lot of Americans who believe that Israel has now dragged the United States into a vulnerability that could result in a broader escalation in the Middle East. Now, do you think the news conference, which will be held by the top military leaders on Sunday, is going to justify the claims further, or is it going to quell these doubts that are emerging in the American taxpayers' mind, and rightly so?
Yeah, it's a very valid concern. There is no appetite among the isolationists, which are mostly Republican, the anti-war gang, which is usually Democrat. They just have to, we'll see what they say, but they really have to have a convincing argument with evidence that this was a clear and present danger, and the United States had to act immediately, or else American national security interests, American lives here at home, troops abroad, something very bad would have happened if the United States didn't take this action right away. That's the convincing that they have to do. And, the American public, they're pretty patient, but when their patience whines, then you can't get that public opinion back. So, like I said, for now, it's hard to imagine President Trump will lose any support from doing this one-off strike. Moving forward, and let's see what the generals say. I think Pete Hegseth, the defense secretary, is also expected to speak. Are they going to be convincing the American public? And when I say the American public, Congress is an extent of that. Or is this debate going to continue? And if President Trump then becomes that president and just does everything by himself, then, like I said, he may be able to do that now, but the price will be paid for Republicans during the midterms. No question about that. And the Republicans cannot afford to lose the House and Congress.
Right, Susan, and the next obvious question is, of course, what next? Do you think there's still any scope for diplomacy, and at whose terms is it going to be? Because from what's happening, we understand the U.S. thinks it has gained an upper hand over Iran by the virtue of the latest strikes that it has called to be highly successful, as they've obliterated Iran's nuclear capability to a great extent. Now, do you think after everything that's transpired in the last 1 week, more than 1 week, do you think there's still scope of diplomacy to bring Iran back to the table and negotiate terms that can actually be implemented?
Maybe, because, maybe Iran will see that the United States was serious when it mentioned this, because the Iranians knew that Americans had the capability to take out Fordo, Natanz, and Esfahan, notably Fordo, that the Americans were the only ones that were able to do that. Iranians knew that. They just never thought the United States would go as far to do this. So maybe this is what it takes for Iran to come to the negotiating table. And, from an optimist perspective, they would say that maybe it could lead to some kind of deal where Iran is contained, and then it opens its doors and it becomes part of the international community, which is the promise that Europeans and Americans made when they were trying to make that deal. But again, maybe not. Maybe ideologically, in terms of national security, public opinion, and whatnot, maybe the Iranians will see this as an opportunity to attack the United States and Israel more. more Israel than the United States, because the ethos of the Islamic Republic, the foundation of it is to wipe Israel off the map. So, you know, if this is an opportunity for them to be able to do this, I mean, they have a holy decree for this. If this is an opportunity for them to do this, and if they are willing and capable, that's the most important thing, then they might just go ahead with that route. It might be better for them. But the hope is that someone is going to come to the negotiating table and say enough of this nonsense.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Susan, for helping us unpack these latest developments. And of course, we'll keep coming back to you throughout the day as and when we have more updates.